Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever the case may be. Welcome to a special Saturday edition of Cross Examinations. I was going to do God Squad, but I am too disorganized to gather the squad for the godding part. So I wanted to do a special edition because, as you guys know, I've been doing for the past couple of weeks. I've been looking for atheist arguments and going through them, the listed arguments, and they weren't sending their best. But yesterday I did 10 atheist facts, I think it was called, or 10 things you didn't know about atheists, something like that. I don't remember. And a bunch of atheists, much more eloquent, erudite atheists, have responded in the comments section. And so I was going to, with all due respect, respond to some of their commentary. One in particular I was reading last night, and I was like, this guy is intelligent, has well thought out arguments, and I was going to go through that. But then I woke up this morning and I've got even more. So I don't know how many I can get through. But this isn't going to be as rigorous and structured as the daily or the weekday edition of Cross Examinations, because it's just me. If one of my guests pops in as well, then we can go through that too. But yeah, I got my coffee. I'm up. I'm awake. I've got my prayers in. Let's go. So first, I got to get over to Blacklist Universe. Whoops, that's the wrong thing. Okay, this is Blacklist Universe. This is... Wait, was it the Blacklist Universe one? 10 facts about atheist cross-examination. Or was it on the other one? Sorry, I thought I had this lined up already. And maybe I need to just go to YouTube instead of... I'll just go to YouTube. All right. So you guys know that I make my atheism versus agnosticism claims based on being raised agnostic. What my father had ingrained in me as to the difference between atheism and agnosticism. I am not a agnostic theologian or an atheist theologian. In other words, no, I did not go through. I'm not a college educated, indoctrinated, studier of the grand philosophical meaning of atheism. Some of these guys seem to be. So I'm going to go ahead and... I freaking lost it again. So there's this white guy is Theoskeptomai, God skeptic. All right. No. Let's start with his first. Is this first or second? Let me see. There is but one claim that the position of atheism regards, and that is the theistic claim that God or gods exist. Like all claims to truth, this claim breaks down on three dichotomous axes: truth of a claim, acknowledgement of the claim, and a sufficiency of knowledge as to the claim. The first dichotomous axis addresses the truth position. Like any claim to truth, the theistic claim is either true or not true, false. There is no middle ground. The second dichotomous axis addresses the acknowledgement position. The recipient evaluating the claim either acknowledges the claim as true, theism, or does not acknowledge the claim as true, atheism. Again, there is no middle ground. And I appreciate this guy's explanation as to why he ultimately acknowledges that he doesn't have enough information to know whether or not there is a God. He is simply taking the position that there is not enough information or evidence that he has been, well, not that he's been exposed to. I will say that he has accepted as valid in order to hold the theistic position. Hence, he takes the opposite position, which is atheism. So he calls himself an atheist agnostic or an agnostic atheist. I can't remember which one. So it's a little less black and white. I mean, it's funny because he's saying dichotomous, which is black and white, and he's a little. I don't know. I think there is a middle ground because I think, again, I'm going based on the way my dad raised me as an agnostic. So, and then a couple of these guys have been, they were complaining about, was it Huxley or somebody who came up with the whole agnostic concept and made it the mushy atheist. They're not using that word, but the sort of the soft atheist claim. So I'm just going to run to the end of this because he makes a great argument, but I kind of summed it up already. The agnostic atheist claims to not have sufficient knowledge or information to justify changing their initial position of atheism, so they continue to suspend acknowledging the truth of the claim until sufficient evidence is presented. Only the Gnostic theist and the agnostic atheist are justified in their final positions. The former is justified in changing their position to theism by revelation. The latter is justified in suspending such acknowledgement until sufficient credible evidence is introduced and therefore remain atheists. This is how I can demonstrate that I am indeed an atheist, an agnostic atheist. All right. Well thought out. Look, if you want to call yourself an atheist, I get it. And again, I'm just coming from where I was raised. He makes a really good argument. So I will be less harsh on people who want to call themselves atheists because he made a great argument. So there it is. I'm gonna pull back on my absolute, my position that you're making a truth claim if you're an atheist, a truth claim that you cannot know, hence you should be an agnostic. But I understand the position of decidedly being anti the position of theism, which is anti-theist, which is, I mean, really isn't. Okay, so who is it? Adam Friended. He would consider that there's a whole nother position, guys. He would actually consider that anti-theism, not atheism. But maybe I'm spending too much energy on that. Acolydia says they sure expend a lot of time and energy fighting someone whom they don't believe exists. It's interesting because someone, I don't know if it was this guy or one of the other guys, made the comment that they find it ridiculous when people claim that atheism is a religion. It's the opposite of religion, and it's true. It is the opposite of religion. Well, here's the thing: they act very religiously about their beliefs. Religiously in the not in the based on God sense of religion, but the religious in the oh, what the heck was the where they're like you said, spending a lot of time and energy fighting for what they believe to be true. They're overtly conscientious about their belief that they have no beliefs. Not that they have no beliefs, that they have no belief in God. Belief in God. Sorry, I just got up, and so my mouth isn't quite working yet. But that being the case, anyways, like, subscribe, share if you're here new. If you are in Blacklist Universe, please click the link over there in the pinned chat and come on over to the other channel. Let me get back to this other guy, this guy Theo Skeptomize other argument. He gives me a full list, and this is the argument I actually wanted to address. Again, intelligent, well thought out. I'll do my best to steel man his arguments. I respect the guy's response, so I'm not trying to make fun or take any jabs. So he says, I am an atheist. I define atheism as suspending any acknowledgement as to the reality of any particular God until sufficient credible evidence is introduced. My position is that I have no good reason to acknowledge the reality of any God. Okay, definition understood. And here's why I currently hold such a position. Below are 10 facts I must consider when evaluating the claim made by certain theists that some God actually exists, or exists in reality, he says. To be clear, these are not premises for any argument concluding there to be no gods. These are simply facts I must take into account when evaluating such a claim. Number 1, I have personally never observed a God. It's an interesting... I don't want to be all Jordan Peterson, but what is it exactly you mean by observed? And what is it exactly you mean by God? And what do you mean by personally? And I? And that's how Jordan Peterson tends to get about these things, right? He's like, do you believe in God? Well, it depends on what you mean by do and you and believe and God. I've personally never observed a God. So, dang it. What did I do? Stupid me. Gosh darn it. Try to make it easier for me to read and just do this screen over here. But I'm what the heck is happening? All right, never mind. I'll just leave it over there. So, to the theist, and to, I would say, the majority of the entire population of the entire planet for the entire history of the entire existence of mankind, the default position has been that everything you observe is the creation of God. Everything you see is evidence of existence. It was only, how many was it, 160 years ago or something like that? Erasmus Darwin and John Lamarck came up with this idea about evolution and tried to create a field of study that would explain away the necessity of everything you see around you having been the creation of God, right? I believe it was John Lamarck. John Lamarck was the head of the British Museum, I believe, and he was friends with Erasmus Darwin. You might be familiar with the last name. And he was looking at the different fossils that they had at the museum. And he kind of lined up, I think, 4 or 5 of these fossils. And they were a small horse-ish looking thing up to a modern horse. And he lines them up and he says, well, these things look like they could have been related. Like they could have come one from the other. And then he talks to his buddy Erasmus, and they come up with this theory of how animals evolved one from another, and they got more and more complex over time, something which has never been observed in nature, something that goes against the laws of physics and thermodynamics, goes against the law of entropy. Something that goes against a theory that goes against the laws that we understand for the express purpose of coming up with a reason why they don't have to believe the evidence around them that God was necessary for creation. And so, 150 years, 160 years of indoctrination in education, and this little boy who sat on Grandpa's lap, eating up his stories about how everything came from a gabagoo in a puddle. I don't know who came up with that part of the theory, but the whole origin of species idea that Charles Darwin didn't come up with that. His grandfather did. He was just indoctrinated into it as a little boy. And so his worldview was already that when he went out, visited the Galapagos, saw finches with different sized beaks. Oh my gosh. Afternoon, Melissa. What's up, Alpha Pro? Gabagoo. You know, it's a little gabagoo. We come from the gabagoo through the zoo to you. Don't you know? This is what they think is true. All right. So, in reality, all things being equal, the mathematical improbability of abiogenesis and all the subsequent development of complexity, going from random, meaningless gabagoo to complexity so incredibly impossible to even comprehend. The human mind can't even comprehend the complexity of the creation. We can't. And we are intelligent. We have intelligent minds. But you're saying that random, meaningless chance, sprinkled with the magical pixie dust of time, makes all things possible. Well, I mean, mathematically, that's just not accurate. It's mathematically... Okay, I won't say anything is impossible simply because that's making an absolute statement. But the possibility of abiogenesis is so improbable as to be considered technically ludicrous. So, and then forget about the rest of evolution. You can't even start. You can't even start. You can't get life from non-life in a probable what's the word? It's not probabilistic. Is it just probable? It's so improbable as to be absurd. I can't even remember the number. The number is so high, 1 to the freaking 10 to the 7,000th, something like that. You would more likely win the lottery every week for the rest of your life, buying one ticket a week, than abiogenesis having occurred. So the default position should not be, oh, this all happened from random, meaningless chance. All things being equal, even if it's a deist God that, just started it, kind of nudged it along, got everything going, and then somehow, mind you, miraculously, going against the laws of physics and nature and thermodynamics, nudged evolution along, which obviously would make him a horrible, horrible God. But even say that's the case, a greater mind would be required unless you want to believe in this improbability that is so improbable as to be mathematically ludicrous. So the default, all things being equal, the default would be the God of one sort or another. This isn't the biblical God. I understand. I'm not talking, when we're talking about this matter, I'm not talking about the Bible and all of that stuff. I'm just talking about the probability of a theos or atheos. Both being equal, theos is the more rational position to take because the other one is so improbable as to be functionally impossible. So have you ever observed a God? Yes. Have you admitted to it? Well, I don't know if admitted is the right word. I think perhaps you're so indoctrinated into the idea the ideas of evolution, which have been they were force fed. That's why I was an agnostic. I was force fed that stuff my whole life too, and I believed it, every friggin' jot and tittle of evolution. It was taught to me in school. It was taught to me by my parents. It was taught to me by the media. It was taught to me by, I used to love like Nova and all those shows on PBS, and it was always about evolution. I loved that stuff. I was completely 100% indoctrinated, just like I'm sure you are, just like every public school child in America is. So we assume that's the default position because we assume that evolution is true. But when you start looking into it, it's literally impossible. I mean, I came to the position, okay, for you, Theo, who is coming into this fresh. Like I said, I was raised agnostic. And when I became a Christian, I still believed in evolution. I still believe it's called theistic evolution, right? Where you look at the story of Genesis and you line up, first God had to create light, which is energy and matter, and then he had to create, well, anyways, the order of creation. You can shoehorn evolution into the order of creation if you want to. And it's called the day-age theory, where the word for day in the Bible can also be translated age. So instead of the first day, as in the first 24 hours, it's the first age, which could be millions of years. You never know, right? And so it's the day-age theory. So you have those days of creation and the different ages of, you need vegetation, then you need fish, and then you need blah, 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 blah. And then the creatures get more and more complex as you go over time until you get to man. I don't believe that anymore because, like I said, I was already a Christian. I believed in evolution still, but because I no longer, as an agnostic, required evolution to be true in order to maintain my worldview, I could now have an open mind and look at the evidence that I had never been exposed to in my entire life. The evidence that goes against evolution. Like, oh, gee, there's dinosaur soft tissue? What do you mean there's dinosaur soft tissue? You can't have dinosaur soft tissue because they're tens of millions, hundreds of millions of years old. They would have, and this is, I'm quoting the lady who first discovered dinosaur soft tissue. It would have disintegrated at a molecular level by now. But because we have dinosaur soft tissue, which contains carbon, it can now be carbon dated, which is why they don't carbon date the dinosaur soft tissue that they find now on the regular. But see, here's the thing. They know it can't exist. In fact, the supervisor of the lady who found the first they busted open a T-Rex fossil, and they discovered bone marrow, red blood cells, soft tissue inside this thing, which is supposed to be, like 60 million years old. And when she shows it to her supervisor, this was in an issue of Scientific American, I think in like 1995 or something. I don't know. You could look up. It's online still. And she turns to her supervisor and says, "Is this what I think it is?" And her supervisor goes, "Yeah. Now find some reason why it's not." Because it can't exist. Soft tissue cannot exist over tens or hundreds of millions of years. It cannot. It simply cannot. So either the facts in front of you are wrong, the physical reality in front of you is wrong, or the theory that you've grown up believing is wrong. So are you going to go with the facts or the theory? The truth or the theory? and they go with the theory because they have to maintain that worldview. 65 million. I learned that from Jurassic Park. Alfredo says, even metal will rust away after millions of years. Who knows? I don't believe in millions of years anymore. Anyway, so I think that covers number one. Number two, I have never encountered any person whom has claimed to have observed a God. Well, again, the entirety of creation is evidence of God. Now, if you're talking about a personal visitation by God, I would suggest looking up, and here's the thing, you'll just excuse these as some sort of psychological whatever, but I'll just give it to you anyway so that you can do your own research. Look up Muslim testimony, or Muslim sees Jesus on YouTube, and look up some of these testimonies, because okay, I've had miracles. I've encountered miracles, which to me is, is it seeing visibly God? No, but is it encountering something that is something that I prayed for, and then, that's how I became a Christian. I prayed for something and it was answered like that. That is an encounter. Is it an observation? Not with my eyes, but it's an observation in the sense that it's a testimony that God interfered with the normal day-to-day activities of my life in order to fulfill something. And you could just say that's a coincidence, and I understand. I would have said it was a coincidence too, prior to it happening to me. And so, yeah, the subjective experience of the person. But look up testimonies, man. There are testimonies abounding. I'm saying the Muslim one because there's something very powerful happening in the Muslim world when Muslims turn to seek the truth. They find Jesus, and they've had actual observational visitations from Christ in their lives. They've heard voices audibly. They have seen visions visually, right? My father-in-law, he said he saw a vision of Christ after my brother-in-law was killed in a car accident. My father-in-law was Jewish, and technically he's still Jewish, right? But he's a Christian. He's a Messianic Jew now. But because he had a visitation from Christ. So you may not know someone personally who has observed a God, but there are people I know, people who have testimonies online. You can choose to believe them or not, but maybe you can, if you find someone like that, you can reach out and try to talk to them individually, get their testimonies, right? It's like the second generation of people who knew the apostles, who may never have met Christ, but they knew the apostles, and the apostles had their firsthand testimony, right? So that could be very much similarly. It's like you may not know someone directly, but you may get to know someone who has. Welcome to the stage, Edwin Boyett.
Mike S. Miller, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, sir. Alpha Proto says, my mom said she heard people telling stories about encounters. After fasting and praying for a few weeks, she said she saw an angel. She said it was like beams of light in the shape of a person. Wow, very interesting. Alpha Proto in the house. Have you ever had a direct encounter with God, Edwin?
I think what I would call my direct encounters with God typically fall into one of two things, and which you could explain away if you chose to, but either an extreme sense of peace or reassurance, or when I was doing things that I should not have done.
Sure.
An extreme sense of conviction of wrongness.
And the have you ever felt like the Holy Spirit fire, like that blanket cover you? Like I had this one experience where I had a gay friend in San Diego, and he was talking about trying to get out of the gay lifestyle because he'd been in San Diego for like, I didn't say San Francisco, did I?
I think you said San Diego.
Okay, San Diego. And he'd been in the gay lifestyle for like 10 years and had over 1,000 encounters.
Wow.
And he was raised Christian, but he had lived this life for so long, and he's like, I have to get out of this life. I have to get out of this life. And one day, my phone rang, and this was back in 99, 2000, something like that. And my phone rang, and I went to pick it up, and I had caller ID on it, and it said his name, right? And so I picked it up, and he wasn't there. And so I called him back, and he answered. His name was Kyle, and I'm like, Kyle. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, you called me. He's like, no, I didn't. I'm like, dude, I have caller ID. You literally just called me. He's like, I've been on the phone for like 10 minutes. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's weird. And he goes, hold on. And his demeanor completely changed, and he went into gay Kyle. And he's like, I have to go. There's someone on the other line that, and I go, Kyle, it's still me. And he hung up on me. And I just felt this urge to go and pray for Kyle. So I just went and I sat at my desk and I started praying for him. And I'm telling you, I felt that Holy Spirit fire like a blanket on me. I'm like, what? That was the first time I'd ever experienced that. And it was like, I'm like, something's happening here. There's like a spiritual battle going on here, and I don't know what it is. And I was just praying and praying and praying for Kyle. And then the phone rings, and it's Kyle, and he's freaking out. He's like, I don't know what is going on. Faces are coming out of the wall. I have to get out of here. And like I went over, yeah, like demons were like coming out of the wall, freaking him out, like he was under such spiritual attack. And I was fighting that spiritual war, and I had no idea what was going on either. And so I like drove over to his house. He just packed a freaking backpack, left everything in his apartment, and got a bus ticket to go to it's like one of those Exodus international places, like in Tennessee or Nebraska. I don't know, some place on the other side of the country. He just wanted to get the hell away from San Diego as quickly as possible. And that's the last time I ever heard from him. It was crazy. But yeah, I would say that was a direct encounter with God.
So maybe the closest I've felt to that is a couple of times in the Army where we had to do particularly dangerous things. And I prayed for like the safety of the men I was responsible for, and felt like a palpable sense of reassurance. Yeah, like
that goes beyond all understanding.
I felt like I was heard is the best way I can understand it. Right. I was heard, and that my request was granted.
Awesome. Yeah, that peace when it goes beyond understanding, because you shouldn't have peace in a situation like that, right?
Yeah.
Alpha Proto says, I asked that I get a sign if God didn't want me to hang out with a girl. I said, maybe make something fall off the wall. I was asleep. I heard a noise, and my Inuyasha action figures fell off the wall. So, yeah, answered prayer is just a regular thing. So would you call that an observation of God? I think that would qualify.
Have you already read have you put up the young man's?
Yeah, I haven't posted it on the screen because it just, I don't know. I'm just reading them as I go. So I'm on number 3 now, because that was the observation of God one. So Number 3. Do you want to read number 3?
Number 3 is, he said, I know of no accounts of persons claiming to observe a God that were willing or able to demonstrate or verify their observation for authenticity, accuracy, or validity. Now, since what I would call my experiences, it would not satisfy this young man, because there's no way to take that experience out, subject it to some sort of scientific measurement, and so
you can't repeat the miraculous.
And so a lot of the criteria that this young man has established, unfortunately, will probably keep him separate from God, because all of this is, in general, and maybe if we read number 4 first, rather than jumping to my conclusion.
Well, I don't want to jump to conclusions anyways, because I this guy came in good faith.
He did, and it's well written.
Sound, well-written arguments, and I want to make sure we try to steel man it as much as possible. And again, you can't, miracles are not scientifically verifiable. If that's your prerequisite for accepting that billions of people have had personal encounters with God, then I think you're trying to measure water with a tape measure, right? You're using the wrong measurement for the evidence that you're seeking. So
and we can kind of see this in 4 and 5. We can see this in 4 and 5. So maybe we should go to 4 and 5.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've never been presented a valid logical argument which also employed sound premises that lead deductively to a conclusion that a God or gods exist in reality. Now,
I think I presented that with number 1. Where I was saying, because he's coming from the same place I came from. I was raised agnostic. He's obviously either been raised atheist or been convinced that evolution is a valid excuse why you can have everything or anything without the necessity of a or some God or driving intelligent source that would make abiogenesis anything other than a ludicrous proposition.
Can you post Drake Tungsten's quote? All right, so restricting discussion now to the God of Abraham. Drake Tungsten is 100% correct. It's important to remember that God requires faith. And the only way for man to know the creator of the universe and have a relationship with him is through faith, not through intellectual argumentation or deduction or even observance of some ritual. Right?
I understand that, but I feel like sometimes you have to take away the arguments in order to get someone to consider that they should put their faith in God. So that's why I'm all about apologetics.
Yeah.
And the faith that God requires is not believing that he exists. It's believing in him.
Yes.
The devils believe he exists.
Yes. And fear and tremble.
We'd just like to get the atheists to the position of the devil. At least, where they believe he exists. And then they can work on putting faith in him.
All right, so let's read 4 again so we don't get this lost. I just wanted to acknowledge Drake's point. I've never been presented with a valid logical argument which also employed sound premises that led deductively to a conclusion that a God or gods exist in reality. Okay, so number 4, I'm going to come at this a little bit differently than perhaps you might expect, because formal logic has been around now for a good 2,000 years or so. And through formal logic, you can prove things. You can prove things without a lot of trickery, and certain things were demonstrated by formal logic that are absolutely incorrect. Now he does put employs sound premises. Well, but see the thing with sound premises is they're bound by our assumptions, and they're bound by the limits of our knowledge. And so there's certain things we can reason through, and there's certain things we can perhaps prove or reject through formal logic or through syllogisms. You know, the 3-step. If Socrates is man and men wear hats, then Socrates wears a hat. That's
if then.
Yeah.
Be a computer program.
Yeah. But here's the interesting thing. I'm glad you mentioned computer programs, because we can take an AI. We can take an AI right now. Mm-hmm. And that AI is residing in a series of silicon, right? In memory cells, in logic gates that only function in a certain way and function that way every time. But that same AI, and I don't know how much you've read about this phenomena. I think it happened with Bard, with Google's AI, and it happens with a lot of different AI systems. They hallucinate things. And so in processing, an AI wrote an article and then invented 4 or 5 fictional sources for something that completely...
I have heard of that.
Yes.
By the way, if you're watching on Blacklist Universe, please do click the pinned chat so you can come over and hang out with the rest of us unapologetic American.
And there is an argument, or there is an observation here about the finite, about the infinite, about perceptible phenomena, right? And about the tool being used to measure something. Now, these logic systems, they're useful. They're useful with limits. But logic systems, I'm talking about verbal logic here, formal logic, Aristotelian logic, is an extension of the human consciousness and an extension of the particular components of our various languages. Logic can work a little bit different in certain languages because there's different concepts, but it's a tool, and it's a subset of our cognition. Whenever you pick up a tool, whenever you pick up a measuring device, it has limits. And so, you remember when coronavirus hit, right? And everyone was getting excited about mask. And at first, the CDC or whoever said, no, you don't wear a mask. We need to keep those for medical personnel that are... And then all of a sudden, they got flip-flopped, and you were told that a piece of cloth would somehow protect you from a submicroscopic virus. Now, so think about this. Could I pick up a tape measure and measure a virus? No, because the precision of it wouldn't be fine enough, but the individual increments of a virus are not perceptible to the human eye. It doesn't register on the human eye, so there's no way I could, at normal magnification, right? So there's limits to every tool or every system that we try to measure something with. And if you're trying to reason your way or use a tool of logic that has limits, and we, being finite things, are trying to establish the present of the infinite, we may run into some scaling problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say on number 5, we read that, right? Of the many logical syllogisms I've encountered arguing for the reality, I have found all to contain either logical fallacies or false or unsubstantiated premises, right? But just understand, again, the limits to the logical syllogism. Something can be logically correct, but also be completely incorrect.
Wrong. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, we'd kind of have to see the examples he's talking about to address that directly.
Yeah. If we were careful, we perhaps could construct something that might satisfy something, but you're trying to go from the unseen to the seen. And I think the resolution and the capacity of the tool of logic will probably ultimately fail to satisfy itself, right?
Well, I mean, if he's, I keep going back to abiogenesis, because if he's trying to rely on logic, then the logical conclusion is that abiogenesis is physically impossible. So, I mean, he'd have to go to the chemistry of it and understand. Go read it. Go read A.E. Wilder Smith's The Natural Sciences Know Nothing of Evolution, and you understand it's literally so absurd as to be functionally impossible. And so, if logically life cannot arise out of non-life, then logically you need another option. You can call that option God, or you can call it the great big giant head. I don't care what you call it. It can't simply be random, meaningless chance that created all the complexities of the known universe.
When I hear follow logic, okay, if abiogenesis exists in an infinite universe, we should be able to observe some presence of it.
We should be able to do it. Because
let's start with observe. Let's start with observe, because we've only been flying for a century, so you're kind of in a rush here to think that we can go from riding horses to.
My presumption is that if something can happen through random, meaningless chance, then the possibility of being able to do it through intelligent intent should be bazillion times more likely.
We should be able to produce the conditions of pre-life Earth, create that atmosphere with the relevant I guess assembly of free-floating chemicals or the precursors to amino acids, and then we should be able to, maybe if we hit it with some lightning here or there, we should be able to see something emerge out of this pre-primordial soup.
They've been trying since the 50s. They've been trying since the 50s, and they can't create a reproducible amino acid, which is only the first building block necessary to get to the proteins. And then you have to create the particularly structured proteins, put all those particularly structured proteins together into the first cell in order to get something even remotely resembling something that we would qualify as life.
Well, what is the in the universe? Astronomically, what is the limit? What is the limit of our the observable universe from the Earth?
I think 18 billion years.
Like light years?
Unless they've changed it, I don't know. They're constantly pushing it back further and further because they realize they need more time for this ludicrous story to.
No, I just mean the observable, the planets, the stars, and things where we can deduce something. It would seem, at least in the near future, as our resolution grows, right, our ability to observe neighboring stars and planets, as our ability grows to, capture, interstellar matter and make these observations, that we should be able to we should be able to encounter. I wasn't talking about the age of the universe. I was more talking about the radius, the sphere of space that can be observed from Earth with any reproducibility. But it would seem at some point that if abiogenesis exists in an infinite universe, or a functionally infinite universe, right? At some point, we should be able to observe it happening on another planet or another structure comparable to a planet, or in some structure that at some point had conditions even somewhat approximating Earth's. If it's this simple, if it's just a matter of if it's just random chance, if it's just having the correct combination of different elements and molecules and the right gas pressure, the adequate amount of solar energy, being some radius from the sun, and then life assembles itself spontaneously and then all these random sequences of events just keep occurring, and then these sequences of event, they somehow form into differential creatures, right? I mean, think about every step that has to happen through random chance. Billions and trillions of perfect random permutations have to occur to get to the complex life we have here. Yeah. It would seem like if you go down the chain further, you would see evidence of things happening much down the chain further, observable around the universe, right?
It just flashed into my head.
What's that?
Even the idea of getting to that first amino acid, that first reproducible amino acid.
Right.
Believing that proves evolution is like if there was an earthquake and somehow the earthquake created a perfectly shaped brick. You use that as evidence that the Taj Mahal built itself.
Yes, and it's even worse than that. It's that the city of Beijing built itself.
Right.
Shalom.
So, yeah, dismissal of evidence, I don't think, is evidence against that evidence. Right?
It is evidence of dismissal.
It is evidence of dismissal.
But so what he's saying, and this is extraordinarily well written. There's not an emotion.
Harder than the two guys that I've been reading.
And there is no emotional component to it too, which I like. Right. It's not like that caustic, inaccessible emotional component where he's like, really,
he's very rational. He's trying to be very rational from the worldview that he's probably been raised in.
Yaakov the Truth says, why is his voice so monotone?
Because that's Edwin, sorry.
That is my voice.
I'm the one who will not be monotone, so thank you very much. Yes, we're talking, sort of. We're talking about a atheist response. I've been doing responses to atheist arguments for the past couple of weeks, and I did a show yesterday about 10 facts about atheists, and like a bunch of atheists started commenting in the comment section, and so this was the first one. I thought it was very well written and well thought out, and so we're gonna go through it and steel man his arguments, and then try to give him responses that hopefully will have him reconsider some of his preconceptions.
Yaakov, my voice sounds like this because if Jericho is rebuilt, Hashem has asked me to go walk around it and bring down the walls with the resonance of my voice, which I said yes.
That's not what happened. I've told you my theory on this, right?
What's that?
Okay. What were there in the land?
Milk and honey?
Giants.
Okay.
There were giants in that's where
my next guess was loose women, but
okay. Where was Rahab's apartment?
in the wall.
In the wall. Right. What did the Jerichoites? Where did the people of Jericho? What did they know about the God of the Jews?
Vengeful, wrathful. Didn't like giants.
What had the God of the Jews just done 40 years earlier?
Oh, that's right. That's right. Parted the Red Sea, the plagues.
They destroyed the mightiest city in the world.
Was that 40 years before? What was the mightiest city in the world?
Egypt.
So was the capital at Memphis then? Where was the capital?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
But they destroyed Egypt.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's say that the mightiest state or nation in the world.
Yeah. State, nation, city, whatever. So you have these facts. There's giants in the land. There's giants inside Jericho. There's apartments inside the walls of Jericho. There is a population who knows that the God of the Jews is a powerful God that could destroy the greatest nation on earth. And they know that the Jews are on their way. What do the Jews do? Do they attack? No. God tells the Jews, all 2 million men plus women and children, to take the Ark of the Covenant before them and silently walk around the entire city, encircle the city, walk around it, 6 or 7 times a day? For 6 days in a row. What is that in a modern vernacular? That's a freaking psychological terror campaign. Right? So you've got 6 days of everybody in the city freaked out, nowhere to go, no way to run because they're completely encircled by the people and the God who destroyed Egypt. And then on the 7th day, what do? On the 7th day, God commands them to gather at the front of the city and shout as if they're going to attack. What do you do if you're inside the city and you're a giant?
Oh, freak out.
Your enemy is at the front gates. The entirety of the walls are apartments, which means you can get in and out through the apartment. But say you're too big for one of these windows that the spies got out of, and you're a giant. What do you do to the wall?
How many giants do you think there were in Jericho?
I don't know. How many giants does it take to weaken a wall to the point that it falls down?
Yeah, and it's probably fired clay brick. Joe K says giants with apartments or giant apartments? No, the giants lived in the townhouses.
But also, I had always wondered about this. And then, what's the name of that city? It's like 100 AD. It was like, oh no! I think it was like 70 AD. That the Jews went up to the top of the city. It was at the top of a plateau.
The Masada?
Masada. Yeah. The walls of Masada, they're like that. They're hollow on the inside. They're like apartments. So I'm like, man, they did that in the ancient world. These weren't solid walls. They were freaking apartment complexes. That's how the spies got out of the city through Rahab's apartment and down at the outside of the wall. So that's my rational explanation. It wasn't some vibration thing. They ran a terror campaign, then freaked everybody out, and the giant broke the wall, and they all came down crashing upon their heads, and then they went in and killed everybody.
It's possible.
Yeah. I'm just putting the pieces together. Anyway.
Speaking of pieces, number 6. I have never observed a phenomena in which the existence of a God was a necessary antecedent for the known or probable explanation for the causation of that phenomenon.
He really needs to research abiogenesis and how impossible it is.
Well,
it's like the seed. It's like the seed. And everyone's like, oh, well, we'll figure it out. I'm not saying he's saying this, but I've heard it so many times. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out someday. What happened before the Big Bang? We'll figure it out someday. But they fill what they claim. They claim us to use the God in the gaps theory. And they're using the future man will figure it out in the gaps theory. Where it's like, it is functionally impossible, but we'll still figure it out because whatever the explanation is, we will not posit that a God was necessary.
Right.
It's the opposite of the God of the gaps theory.
And there are many things that we theorize. And here's the thing with science. It's so funny how people, particularly like during times of panic or when people are trying to get you to do something, they express religious language towards science. Like, believe the science. Trust the science.
Don't notice that the science always changes.
And science says this is a theory that we accept until something disproves it. It doesn't mean that this is how the world is, but this is the best we can describe it.
Prevailing. And unfortunately, prevailing theories tend to very religiously protect themselves from competing theories.
Yeah.
Joe K says people lived by the walls in some Mesopotamian cities, and the homes formed a kind of a wall. Well, I'm talking very specifically about Rahab and how her apartment went through the wall. She lived in the wall.
Yeah.
She was the spies. Who were the spies? Joshua and no, it wasn't Joshua. Who were the spies?
There was 3 young men. Yeah.
Anyways, the spies were inside Jericho. Rahab took them through her apartment and let them out the outside of the wall through her apartment, through her window. So literally that's the only explanation for how Rahab got them out of the city, because they were inside.
Yeah. And some of this is kind of a side note too. And so if the young man is watching, I'd like to apologize to him for any digressions. But if you get me and Mike talking about the Bible, there's going to be digressions. Sorry. Probably even transgressions. I've never observed a...
Yeah, it is necessary. It is necessary unless you want to you simply want to believe in the absurdity. And I don't mean that, condescendingly. It is literally the mathematical terminology for how improbable abiogenesis is. The word is absurd. So it is literally, you believe a absurdity rather than believe it's that all things are possible, that all things being equal, some sort of God or some sort of greater intelligence guide at minimum guided abiogenesis. At cold minimum, some intelligence had to guide the creation of life from non-life. We call it God. You can call it whatever you want, like I said.
Yeah. I would just say my footnote to this, without fully satisfying this question or this observation, this point, is there are many many phenomena that we accept that science posits or suggests or proves within, and prove, I mean this in the sense of logic or the sense of scientific proof. Okay, so proves within some sort of bounded set of criteria that we can deduce a phenomena or a rule or a relationship exist that 99.9% of humanity will never be able to fully understand, except a summarized version that approximates what the scientist is trying to tell them. 99.9% of humanity will never have the mechanical or scientific apparatus to reproduce these results for themselves, nor even understand how the measuring apparatus works. I bet that less than 2% of the population could give a strong explanation off the top of their head for how a particle accelerator works. And yet we all kind of broadly accept that like subatomic particles exist.
Yeah, when's the last time you saw a quark?
Or a muon or so forth. Yeah. So again, this kind of points to the...
Number one, I have personally never observed a quark. Number two, I have never encountered any person who has claimed to have observed a quark. It is what it is. All right, let's move on.
Yeah. 7. Several proposed and generally accepted explanations for observable phenomena that were previously based on the agency of a god or gods have subsequently been replaced with rational natural explanations, each substantiated with evidence that excluded the agency of God. I've never encountered vice versa.
Well, if he's talking about storms and lightning and, it was Zeus. Yeah, that's acceptable. But again, I sound like a broken record. And I'm just, you have to take your dog out of the fight and examine the evidence against pretty much all of evolution, right? Except for, survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest is like the only thing that comes to mind that's valid in the evolutionary model. But other than that, you can't with an unbiased eye read the evidence against evolution and weigh it fairly, right? You have to be unbiased, or you can't with a biased eye. You have to be unbiased. You have to be a position where, again, all things are equal. There may be a God, there may not be a God. It's like you can't dismiss the God possibility and view the evidence for or against evolution fairly.
Well, there are limits of formal logic. We are finite machines. We are finite. The flesh is finite. We have some proximal ideas about the human brain works in the general sense, right? We know where certain areas of cognition occurs. We have some sense of how memories are formed. We're getting closer with neural implants that can do some things. We know how neurons fire and the structure and the biochemistry of the brain. But what I can tell you, without doubt, is that your brain is a finite organic machine. Now that's reductive, but it has a limit. It has a limit, and its ability to reconcile certain phenomena may never occur, right? Because we only hear certain frequencies of sound. We only smell certain thresholds of smells. We can only survive at certain temperatures. We only see certain wavelengths of light. So there's There's a whole universe of phenomena. There's an infinite amount of phenomena. And we as human beings can only perceive a very thin cross-section of those phenomena. We can only survive a very thin cross-section of those phenomena. And we are bounded by our own limitations. And by formal logic, again, it has this limit because you're trying to explain something that has no cause. That's God, right? Something that is its own cause. The first mover, the thing without beginning or end. It does not fit into formal logic, and it never will.
Yeah, and I'd like to posit that the atheist, at least the materialist atheist, I know, and there's a spectrum of atheism. I'm going to accept that.
Yeah.
But the materialist atheist, if you are one who only believes in that perception is purely this: eyes, nose, mouth, ears, right?
Yes.
That there's no spiritual, metaphysical reality other than, at all, right? If you're a materialist atheist, that is your position. Go start researching near-death experiences, because whether you believe every single person or not, it is just a field of personal testimonies, doctors' testimonies, surgeons, all kinds of testimonies of people who have experienced life or experienced death. They have experiences outside of their machine, their hardware still on the table, right? And their software, their metaphysical self, is in a freaking another room listening to conversations that people had that their hardware was incapable of observing. So just this kind of information, it'll take the baby steps into there is a metaphysical reality. That's how I ended up, where I am. I didn't jump right into, oh, there must be a God, right? From agnosticism to God. I didn't make that jump. I was curious about near-death experiences, and that was kind of my gateway drug to metaphysical reality. And yeah, you can discount all that stuff, and you can say it's hocus pocus and blah blah blah. But at that point, you're just being completely closed-minded. And I'd rather you be curious.
I do like his writing style, but I think from his approach, from the place he's trying to observe God, or trying to observe the absence of God, the vantage point he's standing, it's like standing on the north side or the east side of a house, the west side of a house on a winter day, behind a 10-foot wall, and complaining you can't see the sunrise at 5 a.m. And the reason I say that is that where you're putting yourself at, and the tool, just understand, and maybe this won't make sense to you now. Maybe it will in the future. There is a limit to logic. There is a limit to formal logic. Regardless of how brilliant you are, even the most brilliant man who ever lived was still a finite organic state machine, and thereby limited what he could perceive, limited to the amount of data he could hold, limited to what he could perceive and apprehend. So there are limits. There are limits to what we can apprehend with our physical senses and prove or disprove, right, by these bounded systems. And formal logic in particular, even the good old-fashioned syllogism, is made for, and he refers to this time and time again, like good premises, okay? Formal logic has a bounded set that it can operate in, right? right? We might call that bounded set. A better word for that might be a context. When you broaden that context too far, then a lot of the assumptions start falling apart. And he talked about valid premises. And understand from the beginning, if there is an omnipotent creature, a creator, a deity, a God, that exists outside the constraints of time and space, that was able to will into existence both matter, both time, and the space which, Mike, we can't even really truthfully as yet describe what space is. What defines space? If there was a deity that could command this into existence by his will, a deity, a thing with no beginning, no end, no creator of itself, but itself, you can't fit that concept into formal logic. It will fail every time.
Yeah, it's like trying to measure God.
Yes.
Within time and space.
Yes, stand still, God. We're going to get your inseam. We're going to get you fitted for these trousers.
All right, so I've never encountered vice versa. I posit that you haven't considered the evidence unbiased, with an unbiased eye. So,
and if you choose to be atheos, God in this life may leave you to it.
Yeah. What was someone was saying that? No, that's another topic. Anyways, number 8. I have never experienced the presence of God through intercession of angels, divine revelation, the miraculous act of divinity, or any occurrence of a supernatural event. I have answered prayers. Yeah, that's how I started down this path. So, and I mean, if you want the testimony of people with answered prayers, you just got to ask for them. If you personally have not had that, then have you? This is the curiosity. I don't know how people pray often. It's like I need something. You know, I don't know what his prayer life. He says, I believe in another thing that he has prayed. That might be someone else. I've a bunch of different atheists have responded to this stuff, but
actually, I could tell you one thing that happened to me that I believe was divine.
Yeah.
I was in Egypt in the Sinai. We were doing a land nav course. It was overnight. I think there was an Ein formation because I got off course even though the compass reading was correct. I took a step off a cliff and I should have fallen down about 50 feet. And I got pushed back.
Yeah?
Not both feet off, but I had one foot. I should have kept going and took a real nice tumble down that cliff, and something pushed me back.
Just something.
Just something
in the air.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, I'm trying to think of. I mean, I can give you just crazy scenarios that I should not have survived, but I mean, they can be chalked up to coincidence. If you're of the mind to believe that was coincidence. There was one time I was younger and I was driving up from LA back to San Jose, and I was driving my friend's Prelude, 1985 Honda Prelude, and his name was Chris, and he was in the passenger seat, and I'm driving his car. I'm doing about 80 on the 101, and we were talking about going to Magic Mountain, and I'm like, oh, I got a coupon from Taco Bell. So I reached in my pocket and I looked at it and I go, it says 50% off or buy one, get one free, or something. I forget what I said, but I said a thing, and then I gave it to Chris, and Chris is looking at it, And he's like, no, it says this other thing. And so I like take it out of his hand and I say, steer. Because that's what you did back then, right? Yeah, drive passenger stairs. And I'm reading it and I go, no, it says this. And I point at it. And Chris, who has his hand on the steering wheel, leans over to look at it. I see in the rearview mirror my friend Mike Rennie, he's in the back, and his head pops up and he goes, Mike! And I look up and we're driving into the gravel. And so I do the one thing you should not do when you're driving in gravel.
You yank the wheel?
I yanked the wheel. I did a 720 doing 80 miles an hour across the 101.
Dang. That's why it's Jesus take the wheel, not Miller
Jesus
take the wheel. Not Miller.
And there are these tree bush thing just in the middle of nowhere. And we banged into that, which like was a giant airbag. And then the car ended up teetering, like literally teetering. There's a dent in the bottom of his Prelude. And there was a 20-foot embankment down. And like there was traffic behind us, which is how I know I did a 720, because I wouldn't have known, because the guys pulled over and they're like, this guy in the truck, and they get out there like, you did a 720. And I'm like, seriously? And yeah, if that one random bush wasn't there to cushion that, I would have been a pancake on the other side of that embankment. Same with Chris and Mike. And you could chalk that up to whatever, but I mean, God had a better plan than me being a pancake on the side of the highway. So.
Yeah, but we can absolutely acknowledge your writer's observation. We can't reproduce any of these anecdotal stories for you until, without something like time travel. How would you even go back and attempt to?
Yeah.
And then if we had time travel, we could just, well.
If we had time travel, it would disprove the Bible.
Yes.
Because God is the only one who can see the end from the beginning, and the fact that there is fulfilled accurate prophecy in the Bible is one of the greatest proofs that the Bible is written by God and not by time travelers. All right, number 9. Every phenomena that I have ever observed has emerged from necessary and sufficient antecedents over time without exception. In other words, I have never observed a phenomenon, entity, process, object, event, process, said process twice, substance, system, or being that was created ex nihilo, that is, instantaneously came into existence by the solitary volition of a deity. No, you believe ex nihilo was random, meaningless chance and time, and thus all of life began in a primordial soup somewhere, and you have to believe that absurdity in order to exclude that there is some sort of a God.
In fairness to the writer, he says he gives you a bounded set. He gives you a bounded and limited set. He says every phenomena that I have ever observed. Okay.
Sure.
And that's reasonable.
Yeah, because nothing does just spontaneously come into existence.
But you're
nothing spontaneously comes into existence.
Most of the phenomena that you have not observed and that is unobservable would have, in the absence of a deity, would have had to happen ex nihilo. You would have had to have somethingness emerge spontaneously from nothingness.
Big Bang, if you believe in the Big Bang. Life, the Big Bang, planets coalescing, the whole planetary evolution. This is a funny thing. We were talking about how science as established theories go. I remember, I think it was 1997. I was reading, it was either Science magazine or Scientific American, one or the other. and they were talking about they had just discovered two Jovian class planets that
Right.
were encircling their star at a rate of 24 hours every 24 hours. So, and the interviewer asked the scientists who discovered this, what does that mean for planetary evolution? And they said it completely obliterates the modern theory of planetary evolution.
Oh, because of the formation of the planetoids, it would have been impossible for two perfectly spherical objects to form in the same orbitable path, right? Without,
I don't know what the particulars were, but that was
I'm probably close to it. Yeah.
That was their conclusion. And then the interviewer says, "Well, what do we do with that?" And they say, "We're gonna have to come up with another theory." They've never come up with another theory. They're still teaching what they were teaching in 1997, even though they had evidence that obliterates that theory. It's still the prevailing theory, and no one has come up with another one.
And we don't have time to get into it today, but there's a phenomena that's been observed kind of recently called entangled particles, where you can create a link between two particles, and something you do to a particle in this space will behave or affect the behavior of the particle, the co-entangled particle in another space, which kind of breaks a lot of the quantum entanglement. Thank you, Seven.
Yeah.
All right, 10. All claims of a supernatural or divine nature that I have encountered have either been refuted to my satisfaction or do not present as falsifiable. Well, if God exists, he's not falsifiable. Falsifiable meaning a theory, like a thesis that you can test, and it's either right. But if you're claiming something, and again, this is the limit of formal logic. This is the limit of the scientific method, and I think your writer would agree with me that we are finite state machines, and that our observations have limits, our tools have limits, and one of the tools that has a limit itself is our own intellect and the limits of human reason. And something can be, again, I think we've established, maybe, I don't know if we've established it to I didn't have the time to construct any of these types of syllogisms, but we can establish something that is logically correct, that is observationally incorrect or false.
Yeah, you're going back to the logic thing.
Yeah, but it all kind of boils down to that. Right, because he's talking. What he's saying is, I cannot.
But I think he's looking for some example to the contrary of what he's positing. Right. So my claim is that the Bible is supernatural in origin. The evidence of that is fulfilled, accurate prophecy that was recorded outside of the Bible, but written prior to the event. The fall of the city of Tyre is something that historians try to discount because it so accurately describes how how Alexander the Great destroyed the city of Tyre, and it was written and recorded, I think, 300 years prior to Alexander the Great being born. And Alexander the Great didn't have it in his possession and say, "Oh yeah, gee, this is what I should do." So that Jesus's prophecy about the destruction of the temple. There's so many very, very specific prophecies told. I mean, there's over 300 prophecies in the Old Testament about Jesus' life and resurrection. But here's the thing. I know from an agnostic or from an atheist perspective, you will discount self-fulfilling prophecy. If it's in the Bible, you're not going to prove it with the Bible. You can't prove the Bible with the Bible. I mean, you can, but they'll dismiss that. So I don't try to use those arguments. But when Jesus made the prophecies, and these were written prior to the fall of Jerusalem, he prophesied that not one stone will be left on top of the other in the temple. And it wasn't until, I believe it was Trajan came, burned down, destroyed the temple, and then because the interior of the temple was gilded, there was, I don't know how many pounds or tons of gold there were inside of the Holy of Holies in the temple. He knew that gold was there, but when he burned the temple to the ground, that gold melted into the stones. So he ordered his soldiers to remove stone by stone, so that literally not one stone was standing on top of the other, to retrieve the gold that had melted into the floor of the temple. That the recorded history of Alexander the Great's destruction of Tyre, the mathematical precision of the rebirth of Jerusalem in 1948, May 14, 1948, was prophesied literally to the exact day, 3,500 years in advance by Ezekiel. These kinds of prophecies are evidence of a intelligence outside of time that delivered that information to people in the past before. It's history written in advance. To me, that is supernatural. That is outside of the natural realm, because time is a linear experience for mankind. Therefore, that is the natural course of events. That's why I was joking about, if time travelers existed, then it would discount the Bible. But time travel doesn't exist, and it will never exist. And if they did, what's the joke here? You're a time traveler from the year 5058, and you want to go, fool everybody into believing in Jesus? That's your big plan. So you're going to go throughout time, and you're going to intersperse. You're going to pull Abraham out of the Chaldees and convince him that he's talking to God, but really it's you, because it's a big prank. No, that's unfeasible. So unless that's the truth, and we're all idiots, God delivered that information. That is a supernatural piece of evidence. I suggest you research it for yourself with an open mind, not a mind determined to discount God, no God, right? If you're determined to not believe this stuff, then you will not believe it. If you're saying all things being equal, I think the evidence weighs far heavier on the God possibility.
And so I kind of had a different approach, because what the young man did was looked at, he's essentially describing two systems. I should take a moment, because he's leaving some quality comments, and acknowledge Henry Thrun in the live chat. Hello, Henry.
Hello.
I took a different step, because if I can bring into question the methodology, the accuracy and calibration, and the limits of the measuring devices he's using, or the test he's using, which I think I've successfully done. And the young man can let me know. And I keep calling him young man. I actually have no idea of how old he is. Right? I'm sorry about that. You might even be my elder. I don't know. The writer who was kind enough to participate. Examine your systems. Examine the systems. Examine the criteria that you've set up to come to these conclusions. And think very carefully to yourself, can I test? How would I test the scientific method in the general sense? How would I test and establish what are the limits of formal logic? What are the limits of logic when trying to approximate something that I can't put into a bounded set, because I'm trying to describe an infinite concept? I think you may find a couple of places where, if you look closely, I could be wrong, but I think if you look closely, you might find there are some limits to formal logic when applied outside of an appropriate context or the limits of its context. Now just think about that. But I do appreciate him participating.
Yeah. And here's his, what he wraps up. All of these facts lead me to the only rational conclusion that concurs with the realities I have been presented. And that is the fact that there is no good reason for me to acknowledge the reality of any God. I have heard often that atheism is the denial of the Abrahamic God, but denial is the active rejection of a substantiated fact once credible evidence has been presented. Atheism is simply withholding such acknowledgement until sufficient credible evidence is introduced. It is natural, rational, and prudent to be skeptical of unsubstantiated claims, especially extraordinary ones. I welcome any cordial response. Peace. To it, I believe that you're not giving, like I said, the option equal measure or equal weight, right? You're not saying that there could or there could not be a God. You're probably, I don't know how you were raised. I don't know if you were raised in understanding the Christian Abrahamic. I don't know if you were raised atheist. I don't know anything. That's kind of the problem, because I don't want to make presuppositions about what his presuppositions are. I just feel like he's not giving equal measure to the possibilities, God, no God. And because of that, people tend to, if you are already pre-designating the idea that there is no God, then the evidence, it's a simple matter of will at that point. If you will not believe this evidence leads towards God, then you will believe that it leads away from it, right? So I don't know. I don't want to make presuppositions about how he was raised and where he's coming from, but that's kind of my general response to that. Is like, if it's a matter of will, whether or not you examine with an unbiased.
We can generalize the statement, and we can falsify this. We can falsify, too, that he probably does not apply this as a universal theory. Atheism is simply withholding such acknowledgement until sufficient credible evidence is introduced. Okay. I would say, unless you're a combination of electrician, physicist, mechanical engineer, chemist, and biologist, and a structural engineer, that every single day you stake your life on complex systems that you don't fully understand. Wesley Curry says, "Hi, I'm Wesley. It is hilarious to watch you two play Nya. Okay. Is Wesley the author?
No, it's Theo.
Are we playing Nya?
No, I think we're being very rational.
Henry, Mike has a letter in the Discord server. So Mike put out a call.
This was a response to my previous episode, 10 Facts About Atheists. And this was actually on the Blacklist Universe site. And if you want to go see that, I can put the link in the chat.
Yeah. But going back to what I was saying is that everyone atheist included, make use of complex systems every day, trust their life to complex systems that they themselves are probably unable to reproduce or even fully articulate why they work. Now, it may be reproducible in general. Is that a good example? I'm not sure, but...
Not sure either.
But let's see. I guess where I was going is your acknowledgement of something is not necessary for a phenomena to exist. And there is a very real probability that even with the advent of AI and approaching the singularity where we have this super extra human intelligence, that we reach some barriers of observation and reproducibility, and some things may not be able to be described and comprehended. And
It's funny because you brought up AI. You know how ChatGPT is totally biased,
yeah,
right? Well, my friend Cedric, he used the same base thing and created another AI system that isn't fed with all that bias.
the constraints.
Yeah, the constraints of ChatGPT. It's totally freaking biased to the left and to evolution and all of this stuff, right?
Sure.
But I had an argument with this unbiased AI, and I said same thing. I'm saying all things being equal, I got that AI to admit that all things being equal, abiogenesis doesn't make sense without an intelligent creator.
Interesting. You know,
I got
side
AI
note.
to admit it.
Side note here, and we're running kind of long. But when they put those limits on those large language models, those kind of artificial barriers to prevent it from producing certain results, right? It actually cripples the system a little bit. It reduces its actual efficiency. So to make the AI or the large language model adhere to modern liberal sensibilities or modern progressive sensibilities, you actually have to make it retarded, and that's kind of ironic.
Yeah. Evan says Elon's about to launch XAI. So yeah, I think Elon created OpenAI, and he's kind of disgusted with the way they have curtailed its ability to think rationally. And so I think that XAI is going to be the unbiased version of ChatGPT. At that point, I will once again make this argument. Now, maybe I'll just do it on a live stream and show that if you are a rational, unbiased information source or artificial intelligence, you will see, or I can prove that it's abiogenesis is functionally impossible.
Yeah. I think we've exhausted the topic for today.
I think we have too. All right. I want to thank everybody for coming in, hanging out with Cross Examinations today. It was a very special Saturday edition where we were not so rigorously held down to, what I do on the regular 1 hour show during the week. So, biased AI is like a snake eating its own tail. Amen. Babylon B did a good video about who's behind AI. Oh, really? But it's Babylon B. All right. Edwin, any last thoughts? The Afar, I have to do a couple catch-up episodes on Afar. The link is in the description if you want to check it out. It is my my wordless Bible, sort of a silent movie version of the Bible told in a Calvin and Hobbes style. Link is in the description, like I said. Edwin, any last words before I wrap this up?
No, just that it's a scary and alarming time for a lot of people, but we're commanded to fear not, and I would just pray that the peace of God would be upon all of you.
Amen to that. Wesley Curry, you're weird.